So FTA, fairly quickly after the referendum result was known, came up with an ABC guide to Brexit, which really helped us map all the issues, where the opportunities as well as the pressure points were going to be for the industry. And from that, we then produced our FTA Brexit Manifesto, which basically outlines our key asks to government. So we've got 10 core recommendations as part of that. We're looking at the opportunities, of course, for the global level, so how we can make the most of trade with the rest of the world, how to minimize the potential negative impact of new barriers on trade with the EU, and also making the most of Brexit domestically to have a very successful country and a very successful logistics sector in the UK going forward. So on the global dimension, that's where we see the biggest opportunities probably going forward. What we'd like the government to do is really focus, on the one hand, on the key economic emerging powers, where the EU might not necessarily have a trade deal or might not have managed to negotiate one yet, to try and get something that would be better attuned to the UK needs and interests, but also to replicate the existing arrangements for preferential trade with developing countries. That's very important, especially for the retailers that are members of FTA, so especially for things like textile, for instance. A lot of it would come from developing countries, so we need to make sure that it can keep coming with very, very low level of tariffs, or no tariffs at all, if possible. We're also asking government to make sure that we've got a very attractive transport infrastructure in place in the UK. It needs to be world class. We're in the top 10 classification of the World Bank on logistics at the moment, and we're really doing quite well as a country. But if we still want to be attractive for trade, and ultimately that means more jobs in the country as well, the infrastructure has to be world class. So that means the third runway at Heathrow, for instance. That means investing in ports, making sure that we've got enough capacity so that they don't get bypassed, and all the cargo is not going to Antwerp or Rotterdam or other ports in Europe. And that means also making sure that our roads and rail links are able to connect us to the rest of the world and serve the last mile as well. So that's quite important in terms of the global perspective. On the European dimension, I guess the most important thing for us is to make sure that the trade with the EU can continue with minimum hindrance and red tape and blockages. So we don't want to see huge delays, for instance in Dover and Calais. We'd like the procedures to keep the red tape to a minimum, and keep the costs ultimately to both the operators and the cargo owners to bare minimum as well. So that's really important, and we'll of course place a specific emphasis on Ireland, because Ireland has got a very high level of dependency with the UK in economic terms. A lot of companies would tend to look at the UK and Ireland as one market. In fact, that's the way they organize very often. And in sort of road transport terms, a lot of Irish companies would also use the UK as a land bridge towards the European Union. So that particular relationship with Ireland needs to remain as seamless as possible. We want to really avoid seeing a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And typically we've got some companies, some members within FTA who tend to cross the border 30 to 40 times a day. So it's very important for them that it remains as seamless as possible. And on the domestic side, we're looking, of course, at the potential for regulatory simplification, and we've identified certain areas where, perhaps that could work. We're thinking, for instance, the working time directive for mobile workers. That's perhaps something we could reconsider in the future. But there are also areas where actually the logistics sector has benefited from EU rules, such as, for instance, competition rules for maritime, that has meant that the cargo owners were able to get a slightly better service, and that the prices were a bit lower because originally they were just acting like a cartel, basically. Or rules related to rail freight, for instance. So securing access to the network for rail freight companies, making sure that not only the passenger companies get access to the good slots, and that the track-access charges they have to pay, which make a big part of the final price for the consumer, are kept in check as well, and don't become enormous. We're also taking the opportunity to reiterate a number of our policies about support for mode shift grants, for instance, the fuel duty, making sure that this is at least kept at the same level, and cutting it would be even better for the competitiveness of the UK. So we see it also as an opportunity domestically to promote an agenda for change, an agenda for logistics that really works for our members.